The Where Our Minds Wander podcast may contain sensitive content and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised.
Greetings, fellow wanderers, to the places our minds wander.
The house at the end of the dirt road, where disembodied voices whisper and strange sounds make the living shiver.
Where shadows lurk at the edge of the woods, just outside your back door. And mysterious lights speed beyond reason across the clear night sky.
Odd events throughout time that lead you down the rabbit hole.
I'm Wes.
And I'm Beth.
And this is Where Our Minds Wander. Hello and welcome to Where Our Minds Wander, all you fellow wanderers. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, welcome everyone.
Well, Beth, I gotta say that the house is looking pretty festive. We put up our Christmas trees and our daughters decorated them. And I gotta say they did a fantastic job. And our Christmas lights are pretty much all up. So far, I gotta say it's been a pretty great week.
Yeah, we got a lot of decorating done, and most of our skeletons even have festive hats on.
That they do. We just need to purchase a couple more.
Yes, not all of them have hats.
To get them all in the holiday spirit.
Right.
You might say.
Yes, exactly.
And our little tabletop tree in our dining room is looking pretty cool. It's got a bunch of Bigfoot ornaments on it.
It does. Yeah, we bought them last year. They're really cool. So, maybe we'll take a picture of them and put them on Facebook and see if any of you listeners have cryptid ornaments on your trees too, and you can share them with us.
That'd be fantastic. Go ahead, send us some pics. We'd love to see them.
Yeah. We do need to get some more for that little tree, though, so that it's more inclusive of the cryptid paranormal world and not just Bigfoot.
Right. I do think we need to get some aliens on there and everything.
Yeah.
Well, I'll shop on Amazon this week, see what I can find.
Okay.
We still got a bit before Christmas.
We do. We have some time.
Well, I guess no housekeeping tonight. So I think that Beth and I have some pretty great stories for you tonight. So sit back, get comfortable, and let's see where Beth's mind wandered for tonight's episode.
Open lock to the dead man's knock. Fly, bolt, and bar and band. Nor move nor swerve joint, muscle, or nerve at the spell of the dead man's hand. Sleep, all who sleep, wake, all who wake, but be as the dead for the dead man's sake. Now lock nor bolt nor bar avails, nor stout oak panel thick studded with nails. Heavy and harsh the hinges creak, though they had been oiled in the course of the week. The door opens wide as wide may be, and there they stand, that murderous band, lit by the light of the glorious hand, by one, by two, by three. That poem was published in 1837 by English clergyman Richard Harris Barham, otherwise known as Thomas Ingoldsby. His book, The Ingoldsby Legends, included all kinds of myths, legends, and poems. But what is the dead man's hand, or the glorious hand that he refers to, that can magically open locked doors and cause people to fall into a deep sleep? Well, some might say that it's merely a legendary object, a figment of many storytellers' imaginations. And the stories were passed down for decades and across countries until Thomas Ingoldsby heard of it and penned his poem. What sort of stories might he have heard? Well, according to a compilation put together by D.L. Ashleyman out of the University of Pittsburgh, maybe something like this. One evening, sometime in the decade between 1790 and 1800, a woman arrived at the Old Spital Inn, England. She was tired and requested a place to rest for the night. She'd be gone by first light, and if the innkeepers could lay out a plate of food, there wouldn't be any reason for them to cater to her needs. She'd simply rest, eat her breakfast, and be on her way. The innkeeper's family agreed, but before retiring for the night, they told one of their serving girls to sit in the main room with the strange traveler, just in case. Several hours later, as the servant girl was on the verge of falling asleep, she noticed something alarming. It appeared that the female traveler was really a man in disguise. She could see his trousers peeking out beneath the hem of his skirts. The servant girl, now suspicious, pretended to fall asleep, complete with fake snores. The traveler slowly got up, crossed the room, and from his concealed pocket he brought out a candle stub and something quite grisly: the severed hand of a dead man. He fit the candle into the palm of the severed hand, lit the wick, and stooped down to whisper into the servant girl's face, "Let all those who are asleep be asleep, and let those who are awake be awake." The man set the severed hand on a table and opened the inn door, whistling to alert his buddies who were hiding outside. Before he could turn around, the servant girl rushed him from behind, pushing him out the door. She slammed and locked it behind him, then fled upstairs to wake the innkeepers. But no matter how loudly she yelled, she couldn't rouse anyone. Thinking quickly, she ran back downstairs and grabbed a bowl of skimmed milk, and she doused the flaming hand. The men, who had planned to rob the inn, were still outside. And this time, when the girl ran back upstairs, she was able to wake the innkeeper's son. The young man grabbed a gun and shouted from the window to the men outside, demanding to know what they wanted. All they wanted, they claimed, was to have their dead man's hand back. If they got it back, they'd go away quietly. The young man, knowing full well what magical powers the severed dead man's hand possessed, responded with gunfire. The thieves ran away, injured, but never seen again. What powers did legend say the dead man's hand possessed? I mentioned it briefly, but I think I'll tell you once again. Once lit inside a home, it put all inhabitants under a deep sleeping spell and unlocked all locked doors. That way, anyone who had a dead man's hand could enter any home and rob the people of all their treasures. The dead man's hand had a name, by the way. It was called the Hand of Glory.
Oh, I think I like the dead man's hand a bit more. It sounds so frightening.
It does. And to me, I thought the Hand of Glory would be more of a religious thing, and I guess it is in the Bible somewhere, but this is completely different. It's a pretty gruesome tale, especially since in most versions, the fingers themselves are the candles, and all four and the thumb would be lit. It also poses a lot of questions, like how would a thief in the 17th to 19th centuries get one? How would the fingers burn indefinitely? Was there only one, or were there many? And how did these hands possess magical powers?
Well, I could see where they'd get one. Grave robbers.
True.
There were quite a few back then.
There were. But that's not how they'd get them. I'm going to tell you how they get them. So, 3 of those 4 questions can actually be answered, because, believe it or not, the Hand of Glory is a real thing. Allegedly. According to Atlas Obscura, the idea that a dead man's severed hand might possess magical powers may go as far back as the Code of Hammurabi. Hammurabi, who was a Babylonian king, created a set of laws that you've most likely heard of. It's where we get the saying, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But basically, Hammurabi's code said that people should be punished in the same way that they committed a crime. So, in this case, if a man stole something, he should lose a hand. The idea of an eye for an eye became common practice in Europe and colonial America. In some cases, if you think about it, it still exists. For example, if someone commits murder, they could face the death penalty. But anyway, in Europe, including England, the severed hands of thieves were often put on public display as a way to deter other people from stealing. You know, it was like the same thinking as when they displayed severed heads on London Bridge. Some of these relics found their way to various other places and were put on display. Again, according to Atlas Obscura, one severed hand, which belonged to a convicted gambler, was on display at the Haunch of Venison pub in Wiltshire until 2010. It was kept inside a glass cabinet until some modern-day thieves decided to steal it for themselves. Another hand, nicknamed the perjury hand, was kept on display in a church in Germany beginning in 1902. Although there was no way of knowing who the hand belonged to, the church encouraged the idea that people who saw it should think twice before telling a lie. The perjury hand, by the way, was also stolen in modern times.
Well, I guess nobody's afraid anymore.
Or they want it for themselves because they're creepy looking in a cool, creepy way.
Well, you imagine back in the day, you knew that if you stole something, more than likely your hand was going to be cut off.
Right.
Now you're just going to get a slap on the hand.
The wrist. Isn't the saying slap on the wrist? Hand, wrist, potato, potato.
Well, I mean, there's really not much penalty for these things these days.
The perjury hand, by the way, was stolen in 2012. Regardless, the severed hand of a criminal was meant to warn people against committing crimes. So it's kind of ironic, right, that both were stolen. And just as an aside, I have to say that the Haunch of Venison is the coolest name for a pub ever. That pub is also over 600 years old. But I digress.
Yeah, that's old.
That is old. The Haunch of Venison, I'd go there.
Oh, I would too in a heartbeat.
That's very cool. Okay, so just having a severed hand didn't make it a hand of glory. It had to have specific criteria, and it had to be treated in a certain way. First, it needed to be the right hand of a convicted felon who was executed by hanging. The Petit Albert, a grimoire that was published in the 1700s, goes into more grisly detail. It says, quote, "Take the right or left hand of a felon who is hanging from a gibbet beside a highway. Wrap it in part of a funeral pall, and so wrapped, squeeze it well. Then put it into an earthenware vessel with zimmet, niter, salt, and long peppers, the whole well powdered. Leave it in this vessel for a fortnight, then take it out and expose it to full sunlight during the dog days until it becomes quite dry. If the sun is not strong enough, put it in an oven with fern and vervain. Next, make a kind of candle from the fat of a gibbeted felon, virgin wax, sesame, and pony, and use the hand of glory as a candlestick to hold this candle when lighted, and then those in every place into which you go with this baneful instrument shall remain motionless." End quote.
That's quite the recipe.
It is, especially since I don't know what half of this stuff is. A book published in 1823 gave directions that are a little easier to understand. It said, quote, "It must be cut from the body of a criminal on the gibbet, pickled in salt, and the urine of man, woman, dog, horse, and mare, smoked with herbs and hay for a month, hung on an oak tree for 3 nights running, then laid at a crossroads, then hung on a church door for 1 night while the maker keeps watch in the porch. And if it be that no fear hath driven you forth from the porch, then the hand be true one, and it be yours."
It's just that easy?
It's just that simple.
Well, I don't know why everybody's not doing it.
In some cases, the severed hand would be clenched so that a candle could be lodged in its palm without falling over. In other cases, the fingers themselves became the candles, and they were literally lit.
Now, that would be a pretty cool candle to have.
A replica would be very cool to have.
Well, of course, that's what I meant.
So once a person went through all that preparation, they'd have a magical object in their hands. No pun intended.
Maybe that has something to do with the glory of the hand.
Well, it comes from a French term that we mangled and anglicized into something else. But I'll tell you that part later. Legend has it that if you used the 5-fingered candle version of a hand of glory, you could tell how many family members were still awake in the house based on how many fingers would not light. The only way to break a hand of glory's spell was to douse it in skimmed milk. There was another hand of glory tale that I came across that was pretty similar to the one I told at the top of my story, and it was popular in Northumberland, England, and it involved the 5-fingered candle kind. But basically, a weary traveler stopped at an inn and had to sleep on the floor in front of the fire because the inn was full. Everyone was asleep except the cook. She watched as this traveler put a severed hand on a table and used a match to try to light all 5 fingers, except only 4 would stay lit. Because she was awake. Anyway, as the thief went from room to room, the cook tried to put the hand out by throwing beer on it. And that didn't work because it just flamed up even more. She tried milk next, and it went out, and the thief was caught. So, at this point, if you're wondering if hands of glory really did exist, I don't blame you. I mean, the 2 that I mentioned that were on display were both stolen. And we don't even know if they were hands of glory or if they were just run-of-the-mill severed hands.
Oh, my God. Run-of-the-mill severed hands.
Well, there is an actual hand of glory that you can go see for yourself. Allegedly. It is believed to be the only confirmed example that still exists, and it's been on display at the Whitby Museum in North Yorkshire, England, since 1935. It is the 5-fingered candle variety, and it was discovered in a wall during renovations of a thatched cottage in Castleton. Is it a real hand of glory? I don't think I'd want to find out.
Well, still, it's a hand in a wall.
I know. How creepy is that?
Very creepy.
The Petit Albert, that grimoire that I mentioned, also has a spell that you can use to protect yourself from someone using a hand of glory against you. It's pretty simple. You just have to make another concoction. All you need is the gall of a black cat, the fat of a white hen, and the blood of a screech owl. And then you just mix it together and smear it around any doors and windows that a thief might fit through.
Sounds easy enough.
It's a lot more simple than making a hand of glory.
That it is.
I don't know where you find a screech owl in this day and age.
I'm sure you can find one on the internet.
I also don't know what the gall of a black cat is. Gallbladder?
I imagine.
Juice?
I don't know. It sounds like it'd be the gallbladder. I don't know.
Well,
that's something you should have researched. You should know these things.
Well, I didn't because the whole idea of a hand of glory makes me kind of queasy because it's creepy. Storytellers have been using them in their tales for a very long time. Like the comic books Hellboy's Box Full of Evil and some Marvel comics. Or in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. And again later in The Half-Blood Prince. One hand of glory even shows up in Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere. There have also been Hands of Glory on some TV shows, like Season 5 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Season 3 of Supernatural. I've also seen that they're in some video games, too. So, as far as how it got that name, Hand of Glory, it seems to come from the French term for mandrake root, main de gloire, or gloire. I can't pronounce French words. Mandeglore. Main de gloire? Gloire?
That's what it sounds like, yes.
Mandrake root was supposed to make coins multiply. So it's possible that the French term for mandrake root was anglicized to hand de glory, and that might be how it's all linked together. Because hand de glory. See what I'm getting at?
Oh, I got you.
Did you get what I was saying a long time ago and I just did all that for nothing?
No, actually, I blanked out and I wasn't even listening, to tell you the truth.
That's great. Well, hopefully not everybody else was tuning me out.
Go ahead, dear.
So, as I said, 3 out of the 4 questions that I wondered about were pretty answerable. But the 4th, how did it have magical powers, or did it really have magical powers? Well, that one will just have to remain unanswered. And like I said, in this case, I don't really think we need to test it out.
Well, I don't really know where we get all the ingredients to even put one together to test it out.
Well, yeah, they don't exactly put people in gibbets anymore.
That's the hard part out of all of it, is the gibbets.
That's the hard part. That's the most difficult part of this.
Of the recipe? Yeah.
Hey, did you know? Sunglasses have been around way longer than you might think. Inuit people in prehistoric times wore flattened walrus ivory over their eyes to cut out glare. Roman Emperor Nero wore polished gems in his eyes to watch gladiator fights. And in the 12th century, Chinese judges wore flat pieces of smoky quartz over their eyes to hide their facial expressions during interrogations. So, the next time you're sporting your favorite pair of Ray-Bans or your bedazzled cat's eye frames on the beach, you're really carrying on an ancient practice. Who'da thunk it? So what are you sharing with us tonight?
Well, we've mentioned before that we've decorated our house with a pretty eclectic mix of antiques and weird stuff.
We have.
And we were on a Old West kick for quite a while. And we set out scouring antique shops and thrift stores. And we bought saddles, riding crops, old animal traps, some Native American blankets, cowboy hats, mounted antlers and steer horns. And we have some whiskey barrels and photos of Wild West saloons, as well as 2 or 3 brass spittoons and a few antique ones as well. And they're all in our family room where we watch TV together.
So wonder we have anywhere to sit.
I know, especially with the cats.
Yeah, blame the cats, not all the crap we have in our house.
I like a lot of stuff around me. And one of the spittoons, which we knew at the time was a reproduction when we bought it, but we didn't care because it was pretty cool because it had a little engraved tag on the front that reads Goldfield Hotel, Goldfield, Nevada. So just a little bit behind that, in the 1980s, the late Gary Wakefield had a number of reproduction items for sale in his shop in Reno, Nevada. And the brass items all had plates on them that read Goldfield Hotel, Goldfield, Nevada. And we were lucky enough to get one because they don't make them anymore.
Right.
And he put them out as a limited edition because he was trying to raise money for the hotel because they were going to try to renovate it.
And we found it here locally in New York.
I know. Isn't that so cool?
Vermont?
No, we got it here in New York.
We got it here.
So we thought, it's a spittoon. It says Nevada. And the name has gold in it. So why not buy it to go with our Wild West stuff? Well, as it often happens, we brought something else into our house with ties to a haunted location. The Goldfield Hotel just happens to be one of the most haunted hotels in the state of Nevada. So tonight, I thought I'd talk about the infamous Goldfield Hotel.
That is true with us, that, we do seek out paranormal stuff or things that people might think are creepy, like the coffin plaque that we have and things like that. But then at other times we buy things and don't even realize that they have some sort of tie. So that was one of those situations where we bought it for one reason, and then when we got it home and thought about it and looked it up, we were like, holy cow, it's a reproduction. So it doesn't come from the actual haunted hotel, but it's a replica of something from a haunted hotel. And we didn't know.
No, we did not.
You're looking at me like I'm rambling again. I'm going to stop talking and you can tell your story.
Alrighty then. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The town of Goldfield sprung up in 1902 for exactly the reason you'd expect, based on its name. Within 6 years, the population swelled from 0 to 35,000, and within a decade, the surrounding mines produced a whopping $80 million worth of gold. When construction of the Goldfield Hotel began in 1907, 2 previous hotels had already existed and burned down in the exact same spot. But the Goldfield promised to be bigger and more luxurious than anything anyone had ever seen in that part of the country. And considering it cost over $200,000 to build, it fulfilled that promise. That's $9 million in today's money.
Holy crap.
That's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money. Holy crap.
Now, the hotel was designed in a U shape so that all 150 guest rooms have a view of the Nevada desert. Done in the classical revival style, it stands 4 stories tall. The first floor was built out of gray granite, and the upper 3 floors of red brick. It opened in 1908, and by all accounts, it was quite the grand opening. Champagne literally flowed down the central staircase, or the front steps, according to some sources. All 150 rooms had electricity, central heat, and telephones. Many even had their own private bathrooms. The mahogany-paneled main lobby had grand crystal chandeliers and gold leaf ceilings. The furniture had black leather. But most impressive of all, the Goldfield had an elevator. With a speed of 300 feet per minute, it was the fastest elevator in the state. The hotel oozed with opulence and grandeur, so it was quite fitting that George Wingfield purchased it in 1908 for $250,000. Wingfield was a multimillionaire by the age of 30, and he owned several banks in the state of Nevada. He was also the majority owner of the Goldfield Consolidation Mining Company, and he pretty much already owned most of the town. Now, I saw one estimate in which he paid almost $12 million for it in today's money, so the man was incredibly wealthy. Some say he was worth $30 million back then.
Wow.
I know.
Back then, he was worth $30 million.
Imagine.
Holy shnikes.
The hotel clientele ranged from politicians to outlaw gunslingers, so there was a constant mix of the filthy rich and the corrupt filling the rooms. There are also some pretty nasty rumors about George Wingfield, which for over 100 years now have been used to explain one of the major hauntings at the hotel. Now, legend has it that a young lady named Elizabeth was involved with the married Wingfield in the 1930s. In some versions, she's a Goldfield sex worker, and Wingfield was her most frequent customer. But regardless of her possible chosen profession, she became pregnant with Wingfield's child. She threatened to make her situation public if he didn't take care of her and his child. The man was desperate to avoid a scandal, and so he hid her away in room 109 of his hotel, where he made sure she was fed and taken care of. Sounds believable, but here's where the legend gets nasty. For reasons that have never really been explained. Wingfield kept Elizabeth chained to the radiator in the room. He kept her there until she died giving birth. Then he brought the newborn down to the basement of the hotel and threw the baby down a mine shaft.
Jeez.
Yeah, I told you the legend was kind of nasty. Other versions say that he murdered Elizabeth. Now, either way, after giving birth, neither Elizabeth nor the baby were ever seen again. But thankfully, it does seem to only be a horrible rumor. Or, at the very least, there are some holes in the story that just don't make sense. For example, there was never any long-term guest named Elizabeth registered to room 109. Secondly, after a devastating fire that leveled most of the town of Goldfield, which, by the way, was started by a moonshine still explosion, Wingfield sold the Goldfield Hotel to a man named Newton Crumley in 1923, which was at least 7 years before Elizabeth supposedly died. And thirdly, the mine shafts beneath the hotel didn't exist until 1925, when Crumley financed their construction 2 years after he bought the place. But the legends still persist, most likely due to Shirley Porter, the owner of the Goldfield Hotel, in the 1980s. Miss Porter wrote a book about the hotel, which included the scandalous George Wingfield story, and she told people she'd found human bones in the basement. Her stories are generally regarded as being publicity stunts to increase profits at the hotel. But even if the Elizabeth story isn't true, there was a young woman named Mary Barrick who filed a lawsuit against George Wingfield in 1904. Mary claimed she was Wingfield's common-law wife and she wanted a divorce. She said he both emotionally and physically abused her as well as knowingly gave her syphilis.
Oh. Well then, I guess Mr. Wingfield got around.
That he did.
I mean, that part was true.
That's criminal.
Yes. If it's knowingly, yeah.
That's right. Wingfield reportedly gave her $400 and told her to leave town with their child.
The guy that was worth $30 million
I know.
gave her $400.
What a cheapskate. And in 1932, people whispered that Wingfield got what he deserved when 12 of his banks failed. The Goldfield Hotel shut its doors for good in 1945. Today, you can walk around the outside and peer in through the windows of the essentially abandoned building. But few people are granted access inside. Various renovation projects have begun and ended when the funds ran out. So, how or why is the Goldfield Hotel considered the most haunted hotel in Nevada? Well, that's because it is. It first came on the scene 20 years ago when reporter George Knapp did a 2-part segment on it for KLAS TV in Las Vegas. George Knapp was also the first reporter to dive into the mysteries of Skinwalker Ranch in Utah several decades ago. So he definitely has a solid reputation for exposing the paranormal. And he used to be a weekend host for Coast to Coast AM.
Right. We used to listen to him. I've listened to him.
Yeah, I always enjoyed listening to George Knapp.
Mm-hmm.
In his segment, locals that he interviewed said that everyone in town had stories of seeing people through the windows, even though the place was abandoned, or seeing lights moving inside, even though the building was empty. Some locals even said that town police hated to go in there because they never found anything and it creeped them out. Now, up until 8 years ago, the only way visitors could get inside the hotel was to contact Virginia Ridgway, a woman that was in her 80s, who was the 24-hour caretaker. Ridgway had been the caretaker of the property for over 30 years, and she wouldn't let anyone in unless she was with them.
Smart lady. It's a good way to do it.
Yeah, because people are just going to get in there and they're going to vandalize everything.
Mm-hmm.
So she would take them around and be their historical tour guide and their ghost hunting companion, if they asked. For decades, she swore that she saw many apparitions in the hotel and that they never scared her. As a lifelong believer in the paranormal, she said in a Las Vegas Review-Journal article that she always thought of the hotel as a happy place. Most paranormal accounts at the hotel include the apparition of a young woman with long dark hair wearing a white dress, and she has been spotted several times inside the building. Although most paranormal enthusiasts refer to her as Elizabeth, it's unlikely that's her real name, or that she was ever tied to George Wingfield. But it's said that the sad, eerie sound of both a woman crying and a baby crying has been recorded throughout the building. Now, there have also been several accounts of people hearing a baby crying from inside room 109. When they open the door, though, there's no one there. Room 109 itself is said to feel unnaturally dense, as though the air is heavy and oppressive, despite the room always being strangely cold. Although one person took a photograph in the room that seems to show an apparition, most people claim that their cameras malfunction in room 109, batteries drain, that sort of thing. People who have visited the hotel have said that they have also heard a woman calling for a child throughout its halls. Down in the basement, Crumley's mine shafts still exist. People have reported hearing the unmistakable sound of a baby crying coming from inside the shafts. So, was there a young woman who lost a child at the hotel? Well, it's certainly possible. We may just be calling her by the wrong name and assuming certain details about her story that aren't true. Maybe it was Newton Crumley who fathered Elizabeth's child and then murdered her and the baby. One interesting note is that the 2 mine shafts he opened in the basement of the hotel ended up completely goldless, and he was forced to sell the hotel in the 1930s. So maybe it was Crumley.
And there's no way to know, really, unless you can get investigators in there that get very specific interactions with this entity they call Elizabeth.
Right. But then, like I always go back to, are they manifesting something?
Right. If people have, we've said this before, if people are telling this story over and over and over for decades, then you don't know if you're manifesting something yourself or that people haven't manifested something.
Right. So Elizabeth is just one of many entities that is said to haunt the halls of the Goldfield Hotel. There are others with equally questionable stories. Another female apparition that people claim to see is of a woman who hung herself on the 3rd floor. Another is a male apparition that allegedly jumped from the roof. Although neither of these backstories have been confirmed, the 2 apparitions have been seen frequently. Then there's a second male apparition that many people seem to think is George Wingfield himself, although he passed away in Reno, Nevada. But they're not sure who else the entity could be. When his spirit is said to manifest itself on the 1st floor, it brings the strong smell of cigar smoke with it. People will follow the scent into rooms, only to find the pervasive scent quite strong, but the room is empty. Dozens of people have reported discovering bits of ash on the floor, as if someone carelessly lit their cigar and dropped the ash.
Huh.
Now, I'm not sure if George Wingfield was the type of man who would just let cigar ash fall onto his expensive floor, but then again, maybe he was.
You see, to me, that's a sign of someone who just doesn't care. But maybe he was so rich that he didn't care.
Well, that could very well be.
Almost like, I'm so rich I can just replace these fancy things or something. I mean, I don't know. I'm just speculating.
Or maybe he was just, he sounds like a pig.
Jeez.
Maybe he just didn't care.
Maybe not. Yeah.
So I don't know. He was incredibly wealthy, and he had a lot of political power, but it's hard to speculate about his personality. Although he did push legislation to make Nevada a quickie divorce state in the 1930s, and he was married 3 or 4 times.
Which may be why he pushed the quickie divorce legislation.
It could very well be.
In the 1930s, though, I didn't realize it went back that far.
Yes. Several visitors have reported paranormal activity in the lobby of the hotel, next to the staircase. They say that they've experienced the sensation of small hands tapping on their backs. Then they hear faint childlike giggling. The consensus is that there are 3 children spirits in the hotel, and they are little tricksters who like poking people and then running away. But by far, the creepiest entity at the Goldfield is the stabber. Despite looking, I couldn't find a lot of information about the stabber, other than that he seems to hang out in the main dining room, which was called the Gold Room. Several visitors to the hotel have had the unpleasant shock of walking into the Gold Room and seeing a shadow figure run at them with a knife.
Oh my gosh.
Luckily, no one has been injured, just terribly frightened. The stabber always dissipates before he reaches his target.
Well, I guess that's a good thing, especially if you think it's a real person coming at you.
Well, he's a ghost. It's a ghost knife.
Right, but if you come around a corner into a room and you see a shadow running at you with a knife, it's going to take a bit before it registers whether it's a real person or not.
This is true.
That would be terrifying. And it would be equally terrifying for the thing to just poof and disappear.
Yeah, it would.
I mean, both scenarios are rather frightening.
That they are. Today, the Goldfield Hotel is in pretty rough shape. Like I had said before, various owners tried to renovate the building, but it has proven to be too costly. It's currently on the market for $4.9 million.
Which, if you think about it, is less than what Wingfield paid for it.
Yeah.
It's worth $5 million less now. Right? If they're saying conversion was he's paid like $9 million for it in today's money.
Right. And here's the thing to me. I love that they're going to put it up on the market in hopes that somebody would maybe bring it back to life. But for God's sake, $4.9 million? I mean, that's one hell of a profit.
Right.
Why not just lower this price, say $1 million, and let these people come in and bring it back to maybe its glory that it once had.
Right, because it sounds like it was amazing with gold leaf ceilings and chandeliers and...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine buying it for $4.9 million and then having to put...
$20 million into it?
I know.
Yeah.
And yet, the Goldfield is still a popular spot for both amateur and professional paranormal investigators. In fact, since the building has remained empty of businesses or residents, that's the one way it does bring in some revenue. There have been a handful of paranormal TV shows that have been there. Ghost Hunters has been one of them. And like we were just talking about, it would be really nice to see someone renovate the historic hotel, giving it some of its old glamour and glory back. But it's really going to take some very deep pockets.
Very, very deep pockets.
And I've got the feeling somebody would probably just come in and level this and put up a Walmart.
Which I know. And you know how angry that makes me when our historic buildings disappear in this country. It makes me so mad.
And I like the idea of people buying these old asylums and hospitals and then opening them up and doing paranormal tours to really keep the things going and then do repairs. But
It would be cool to stay in it as an actual hotel, even if one floor was businesses so that they had some sort of rent and revenue coming in. I mean, I would go just to spend the night and run my tape recorder.
Right.
You know?
Well, here's the thing for me. I love the idea of that because it keeps the building standing.
Right.
On the flip side, and I mean, we watch these TV shows, some of them, Ghost Hunters and Kindred Spirits and Jack Osborne stuff. I love it. But here's the thing for me. It just seems that if there is something paranormal going on there, they're making these ghosts or entities relive it over and over and over. And how many times do you get tired of having people ask you questions?
Right. So whoever this entity is that they're calling Elizabeth, if this really did happen to her, where at the very least she lost a child, right? Regardless of whether the radiator thing is true or not.
Right.
If she lost a child, she's being constantly asked to.
She's been bombarded with
relive
questions.
It.
Yes.
Right.
So it's a dilemma of mine. I mean, I want to see it.
It's a moral dilemma of yours.
I love the history of these locations, all of them. I love seeing reputable teams go in and do investigations. But then it's sad in a way, too. Right.
Look at you being all touchy-feely tonight. Usually I'm the one that goes there.
Right.
Well, I know you all can't see me, but he just made a dumb face at me.
We perpetuate it, right?
Right.
So I don't know. I don't know what stance I take on it.
Well, I don't know.
I'm going to keep watching the shows.
And we're going to keep talking about it. So every week.
Right. But I mean, you can see where I'm coming from, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we all want to be entertained. And like I said, I love the history of these places. And I love they're still standing. There's just always that kind of downside if you think about it.
Right.
Which I don't know if it crosses everybody else's minds. I imagine some people it does.
It depends on where they are going.
Right.
Like if there are some where if we're watching, I do feel bad.
The ones with children.
Yes.
Poor farms.
Yes.
Others,
I don't have that same feeling, I guess, which I guess.
No, not like prisons and things.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. Keep reminding them.
Well, no, I mean, I don't want to go too far into it, but I guess, is it an all or nothing where you should feel that way all the time or none of the time?
No.
Oh, okay. We can pick and choose.
Yes.
Okay.
As we do in life.
Okay.
Well, anyways, that may have been a little long-winded, but like I said, it's something I've thought about quite a bit.
I think you have some valid points.
That I do. Well, I think that about wraps it up for this episode, Beth.
Okay.
And like we always say, well, Beth always says, check out our show notes.
Yes, if you'd like to know more about the Hand of Glory or the Goldfield Hotel, you can check our sources in our show notes, specifically on this episode for where we found information.
Yeah, it gives you a jumping off point.
Right.
Well, we hope to see you all next week for an all-new episode of Where Our Minds Wander.
See you soon.